10 years ago to the exact moment two brothers decided to carry out one of the most violent and brutal murders Broken Arrow has ever seen.
In every prison, whispers travel fast, especially the ones about children who crossed a line most adults never approach. Their crimes shattered expectations and rattled entire communities. Tonight, we're not just recounting notorious histories, we're peeling back the layers of 10 lives that spiraled into violence so extreme that entire communities were left stunned. Number 10. Bever Brothers. The Bever home appeared ordinary from the outside, a quiet suburban refuge, lights glowing softly behind curtains. But inside, two teenage brothers were nurturing a secret world built on violence, obsession, and a blueprint for something far larger than the attack that would devastate their own family. Investigators would later discover that Robert and Michael weren't just acting on impulse. They had drawn up maps of future targets, marking specific United States towns they intended to strike next. It was a chilling revelation, proof that the massacre in Broken Arrow was meant to be only the first act in a multi-location campaign of destruction. Their journals weren't the ramblings of confused boys, but organized, deliberate writings that cataloged their fascination with mass killers and their desire to surpass them. The brutality that unfolded wasn't a sudden collapse. It was the unveiling of a plan that could have spread far beyond their home, if not stopped in time. Number 9. India's youngest serial killer. In rural Bihar, villagers first whispered about tragedy, then coincidence, and finally something far darker. Amardeep Sada was only a child, barely old enough to attend school, yet death seemed to follow him with unnerving precision. What investigators eventually uncovered defied every expectation about childhood behavior. During psychiatric evaluation, doctors documented something extraordinary. Amardeep showed no physiological startle response. Loud noises, sudden movements, even simulated threats produced nothing. No flinch, no instinctive recoil. This absence is almost never seen in children. It's a marker associated with severe adult psychopathy, where emotional processing and fear recognition are profoundly impaired. To experts, it suggested that Amardeep's violence wasn't driven by impulse alone, but by a neurological void that limited his ability to experience fear or empathy. Too young to be prosecuted, he was placed in rehabilitation. Yet the unanswered question lingered. How does a mind form when its earliest wiring is missing the most basic human alarm system? Number 8. Lionel Tate. Lionel Tate never meant to become a national headline. He was a restless 12-year-old who loved televised wrestling, mimicking the moves with the unfiltered enthusiasm of a child who couldn't yet grasp real-world consequences. But on that tragic afternoon in 1999, play crossed a line that could never be undone. 6-year-old Tiffany Unick suffered injuries so severe that the medical examiner compared them to a fall from a 3-story building, a level of force far beyond what most preteens can produce under normal circumstances. This single detail transformed Tate's case from a tragic accident into a landmark legal battle. Prosecutors argued that the violence involved couldn't be explained by imitation alone. His youth clashed with the unimaginable scale of the damage, forcing courts to ask how responsibility should be measured when a child causes adult-level harm. Tate's conviction and later release left behind a legacy of questions about intent, accountability, and the razor-thin line between childish play and fatal consequences. Number 7. Roxana Sikorsky. The Sikorsky household looked like any other quiet suburban home. Family photos on the walls, school projects on the fridge. But beneath that normalcy, a plan was forming that no one could have imagined. At just 15, Roxana became entangled with an older boyfriend whose influence pushed her into a darkness she struggled to understand. Investigators would later uncover something especially chilling. Roxana and Michael Rivera had created a written task list for the murders, structured almost like a set of chores. Each step was outlined, sequenced, and disturbingly practical. That detail revealed a level of planning far beyond impulsive teenage rebellion. It showed intention, structure, and a willingness to turn fantasy into action. In court, Roxana apologized through tears, torn between remorse and the realization of how deeply she'd been manipulated. Yet, The evidence told its own story, a young mind shaped by a toxic bond, organized enough to nearly dismantle the family that had fought to protect her. Number 6. Lovesick murderer. Medicine Hat had never seen anything like it. A crime so surreal, so violently out of step with childhood, that the entire country struggled to process it. Jasmine Richardson was only 12 when she and her 23-year-old boyfriend, Jeremy Steinke, carried out the murders that would redefine their names forever. But investigators later discovered a detail that exposed just how deeply Jasmine had slipped into Steinke's delusional world. She had begun researching the same 300-year-old werewolf mythology he used to justify his persona, mirroring his violent fantasies in a textbook case of shared psychosis, or folie à deux. This wasn't just rebellion or adolescent confusion. It was identity fusion, the kind that blurs the boundary between influence and indoctrination. The emails, the planning, the chilling calm afterward all pointed to a child who had adopted an adult's delusion as her own. Her trial forced the world to grapple with a haunting question. How far can manipulation pull a young mind before it forgets where reality ends? Number 5. Sierra Halseth. Las Vegas detectives thought they had seen every kind of impulsive, chaotic teenage crime, but this one carried a level of calculation far beyond the couple's years. 16-year-old Sierra Halseth and her boyfriend, 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero, didn't just plan the murder of Sierra's father. They documented their relationship online, leaving a digital trail of romantic fantasy colliding with violent intent. But one detail stunned investigators during the forensic review. The pair had attempted to destroy evidence using a video gaming console's hidden browser cache, treating the device like a disposable computer. It was one of the first documented cases of teens using a gaming system as a forensic evasion tool, revealing both their desperation and their naive belief in outsmarting digital investigators. The brutality of the attack, the arson, the attempted flight, it all painted a picture of two teenagers more influenced by cinematic fantasy than reality. Yet, the crime's core was tragically simple. A young girl trying to escape control by choosing the most irreversible path imaginable. Number 4. The Teacup Poisoner. Graham Young's story reads like a psychological thriller, except every page was real and every victim lived or died inside his orbit. Long before adulthood, he was already experimenting with toxins, memorizing chemical interactions the way other children memorized comic book heroes. But the most chilling discovery came after his arrest. Young had memorized lethal dose thresholds for more than 90 toxic compounds, a level of precision so alarming that British authorities later restricted public chemical access pathways, specifically because he had proven how easily a single individual could exploit them. When he was released in 1970, declared rehabilitated, that encyclopedic knowledge didn't fade, it sharpened. His notebooks, filled with meticulous dosing logs and observations, revealed a mind treating human suffering as data points in a private laboratory. As co-workers began mysteriously collapsing, the pattern grew too precise to ignore. Young wasn't guessing. He was calculating. Each dose, each symptom, each timeline aligned with the lethal metrics he carried in his head. His case didn't just expose a killer, it exposed a loophole in chemical regulation that his intellect had quietly walked straight through. Number 3. James Fairweather. Colchester had lived through fear before, but nothing prepared residents for the randomness, the brutality, and the youth of the killer stalking their streets. At just 15, James Fairweather committed 2 murders that seemed senseless, until investigators pieced together a behavioral pattern far more methodical than anyone expected. CCTV footage eventually revealed Fairweather performing ritualized patrols, walking the same paths at the same times for weeks, scouting potential victims with the precision of someone rehearsing violence long before carrying it out. Criminal profilers recognized the behavior instantly. Adults convicted of serial offenses often engage in these pattern rehearsals, testing routes, timing their escapes, and visualizing attacks. Seeing a teenager mimic this ritual was almost unheard of. Fairweather's fascination with notorious killers wasn't passive fandom, it was research. Each patrol was a dry run, each night a rehearsal for the control he believed violence would give him. When he finally confessed, it wasn't just to the crimes, but to the careful preparation behind them, revealing a chilling maturity that prosecutors argued left no room for misunderstanding his intentions. Number 2. Mary Bell. Newcastle in 1968 was a city bracing against change, but nothing unsettled it more than the quiet, watchful girl whose crimes would haunt Britain for decades. Mary Bell was just 10 years old when she took the lives of 2 toddlers. Murders so brutal, yet so calculated, that investigators struggled to reconcile the acts with the child before them. But one detail stood out during the investigation. Mary demonstrated manipulation techniques far beyond her age, borrowing phrases from grieving adults and redirecting suspicion with the emotional fluency of someone years older. Psychologists noted that children simply don't possess that level of social engineering. It suggested an early, unusually advanced understanding of how adults interpret guilt and innocence, an instinctive ability to read a room and adjust her behavior in real time. Her trial became a legal and moral earthquake. Was she a child shaped by trauma, or a young mind already fluent in deception? The courts chose diminished responsibility, but the public grappled with a more haunting truth. Mary wasn't just dangerous because of what she did, but because of how well she understood the world observing her. Number 1. The mistake under the bed. In Jacksonville, the disappearance of 8-year-old Maddie Clifton launched a frantic neighborhood search, one that unknowingly circled the very house where her body was hidden. 14-year-old Joshua Phillips joined the efforts, walking beside neighbors and officers, masking a secret he believed he had buried beneath his waterbed. But what he didn't know was that waterbeds create higher internal temperatures, accelerating decomposition far faster than a typical hiding place. That single, unintended detail became the factor that exposed everything, as the growing odor led detectives directly to his room. Inside, they found not just a crime, but a week-long performance of normalcy. Joshua going to school, talking with friends, even consoling those worried about Maddie. Prosecutors argued that this concealment showed calculation beyond his years. The defense insisted it was the terrified reaction of a child who panicked. The discovery shattered the community, raising agonizing questions about responsibility, fear, and how a split-second act could spiral into a tragedy no one saw coming. These cases remind us how fragile the boundary is between guidance and collapse, between childhood and catastrophe. If this journey made you reconsider what shapes a life, leave a comment, subscribe, and stay with us as we continue exploring the stories the world tries to forget.